Hey, what's up, guys? It's Jordan with the Laundromat Resource Podcast. This is show 82, and I'm pumped you're here today because today, seriously, is one of the most incredible episodes we've had on this show. And the reason for that is we have Marc Stern back on the show. He is the Chief Lending Officer and Executive VP at Eastern Funding, and we hit some heavy topics. There's a lot going on in the world right now and a lot going on in our industry right now. And we hit some heavy topics, all of which have serious implications on us as small business owners and us in the laundromat industry in particular. So this is a do not miss episode if you have anything to do or want anything to do with this industry. So look forward to that. I want to take a couple seconds. I'm not going to take a whole lot of time in the front end because I want you to stick around for the rest of this episode, seriously. But I do want to acknowledge, first of all, welcome to all the new people, all the new members, laundromatresource.com, and a huge thank you and welcome to the new pro members who signed up in the last week since we made our first big upgrade to the pro membership. Again, we're continuing to build every week for 8 straight weeks. This is week 2. I have some cool stuff coming out. There's some cool resources for pro members that are out right now, just coming out when this episode's coming out. So we have some very cool downloadables for free. We have a sample letter of intent that you can take both to purchase a laundromat and to give to a landlord as an intent to rent or lease a space. We have both of those there. We have a coin collection sheet. A lot of you guys have been asking for that. So we have a coin collection spreadsheet that you can download and keep and use. And it helps you collect the coins. It tells you how many turns per day. All that stuff is calculated for you, how much you're earning per day, all that stuff. Very cool spreadsheet. I personally use it with my coin stores. So that'll be there on the pro membership. Sample business plan is coming up in here. And also I threw in some sample contingencies. Those of you guys who are making offers on laundromat deals, either without the use of a broker or who just want to kind of make sure your broker is doing the right stuff. Sample contingency list there so that when you make your offer, you're not putting yourself at risk by making that offer with unverified numbers and no way out. Okay. So those are all getting added this week. I have another tool that we've been working on. I thought it was going to be ready this week, but I got to postpone it at least one more week. Hopefully we'll have it by next week because I'm super excited. If you were in the how to buy your first laundromat webinar this week, then you got a sneak peek of it. And it is a very cool tool. I'm really genuinely excited about it. I think it's really cool, and I've never seen anything like it in our industry. So stay tuned for that. That's going to be in the pro membership, and you'll also be able to get to use it for a limited number of times just to try it out before you become a pro member. Okay, I'll talk about that more later. Okay, so we got some sweet downloads coming, letter of intent, all the things I just said. I don't want to take any more of that time. Speaking of webinars, real quick, I just want to highlight 2 webinars. Number 1 is next week. If you're listening to this when this comes out, that's January 20th. I look up the date, January 20th, 2022. A very unique webinar that we're doing. I'm having a buddy of mine who's a lender, a home lender, come on and talk about how you can get a home, how you can qualify for a home loan as a business owner. I know that was tricky for me when I was buying the house that I'm in now as a business owner. And for a lot of small business owners, that feels very unrealistic. It feels very frustrating on how you can qualify for a home loan. However, or a second home loan also. However, my buddy's got some very cool ways that he can help you either now or whenever you're ready to get into a home as a small business owner. So I highly recommend you come join us for that. I'm super excited. The guy has worked miracles for me and continues to do so. And I've actually recommended to a lot of people who've ended up using him. He knows his stuff. Super good guy. Okay. His name's Joe Soto. And again, that's January 20th, 2022. It's going to be 4 p.m. Pacific time, 7 p.m. Eastern time. And you can sign up for that on the website, laundromatresource.com, or on the events page, laundromatresource.com/events. Come join us for that if you're at all, either now or in the future, thinking about buying a home or a second home. And he'll also do some Q&A along with some of the information he wants to provide. Okay, cool. I'm excited about that one. The second webinar that I'm like really excited about also has to do with today's podcast episode. So Marc Stern and I, after we did this episode, we were both very impressed with ourselves. But seriously, we were very impressed with the conversation that we're having and all the things going on. And we just feel like this episode is going to give a lot of information and give some answers, but I think it's going to bring up a lot of questions too. So what we thought we would do after we recorded this is get together and pull together some top-notch owners, none of whom have appeared, by the way, on this podcast. So you haven't been introduced to them through this platform yet. And we're all going to get together and talk about some of these issues in a webinar. Now, as of right now, when this is coming out, we haven't been able to nail down the date, but I'm hoping it's going to be within the next couple of weeks. So a couple of things you can do. Number one, go to laundromatresource.com/events. And I'm going to have a link on there where you can sign up to get an email as soon as we have the information on that. And we'll also be sending out emails. So if you're on our email list for anything else, we'll send out an email as soon as we have that information to everybody and let you know where that's at so you can get in on this webinar. I think 100% of the people who are listening to this needs to be on that webinar. And I've never said that before. Of course, I always want you guys to join me on the webinars, but this one, there's just so many implications to everything that's going on right now. You've got to be on it. And anybody you know that is in this industry, you've got to share it with them and get them on this webinar because it's going to be, the stuff we're talking about is just huge for all of us. Okay. So again, sorry for not having the dates. We're trying to coordinate with just a bunch of us and we just didn't get our act together. But go to laundromatresource.com/events and sign up to get the email for when that's ready on the event page. And or if you're just on our email list, I'll send out an email about that too. Okay. I just want to make sure you knew about those two webinars. Come join us. You know, the home buying one, I know it's a little bit different from what we normally do, but it's a serious issue. It's really difficult sometimes to qualify for a loan as a business owner because of the way that we run our businesses and file taxes and all that stuff. So come to that. And Joe's got some great tips for you. And then obviously you have got to be on this other webinar that Marc Stern and I are putting together for you to talk about what 22 has in store for us and how we can end the year much further ahead than we are right now, when I think a lot of people are actually going to fall behind this year. So, all right, that was a lot more than I was anticipating, but all super important stuff. Thank you again for all of you guys who signed up for the pro membership. The more people who join us, the better it's going to be. So come join us, laundromatresource.com/join, and sign up for the pro membership if you're at all interested and are at that point in your journey of laundromats. All right. Let's jump into it with Marc because, again, incredible episode. You're going to love it. See you on the other side. All right, Marc, thank you for coming back on the show. Times right now are so crazy. And when you and I were having a discussion about, what's coming up in 2022, I said, we need to do this on the podcast because I think people are interested. There's so many things going on, and I'm excited to talk with you about all these different things and what that might mean for us. But thanks for coming on the show. How are you?
Great. Doing great, Jordan. Appreciate the invite again. Enjoyed doing it the first time. And I think we'll have a really good conversation this go round. I hope you and your family are all doing well and looking forward to 2022. Going to be an interesting year.
Yes, it is. And thank you. Family's doing well. Everybody's healthy and safe. Hope likewise for you and everybody listening.
We are.
Yeah, good. Yeah, it's definitely poised to be an interesting year. We've kind of put together sort of a bullet point list of some things to hit on. But, kind of high level, let's start high level and kind of work our way down. I like, the phrase you used is headwinds for 2022. And I think that's really just an apt term because it kind of does feel like the winds are blowing us in some interesting directions right now. And maybe we can just kind of talk a little bit of overview. What are, some of the things that are going on, right now and that we're anticipating for this year, this 2022. And then we can get a little more granular for each one.
Sure. Well, I want to start by saying being in this industry for 30 plus years, this is the first time I've seen some of these things. And I think they're major headwinds that we're all going to be confronted with. And we got to figure out how best we can navigate them and get through the year and have a good, prosperous year. Considering that 2021, pandemic aside, was a pretty damn good year for most people, especially for this industry. So the topics that I see blowing in the wind and blowing right into us at maybe 50 miles an hour or better are equipment price increases, delivery times, construction cost, interest rates, and possibly value of stores. I think those are pretty hefty topics that are going to be front and center as we get into this upcoming year.
Yeah, I think kind of too, maybe we can touch on kind of weaving all throughout all of those things is this inflation that's
absolutely
getting out of control right now. And everybody's kind of trying to figure out, what does that mean for everybody? I mean, whether it's just your personal finances or your business finances or whatever. But in particular, what does that mean for, owners or people who are trying to get into this industry, here. So that's right.
I think inflation's where we got to start because inflation / part of the pandemic has caused a lot of this stuff. And I think, inflation sitting at what reported 6.5%, but I think it's really higher than that, is the highest in about 30 years. So we haven't really seen it. Your generation certainly hadn't seen it. My generation hadn't seen it for a long, long time. So this is something that's going to affect all of us. It affects everything from food on the table, gas in the cars, to equipment pricing, build out. It's just everything is affected by it. The Fed initially said this is going to be a short-term thing. Now they backtracked on it and they said, nope, I think it's going to be here for a while. So we have to deal with it.
Yeah. And I mean, inflation's always been kind of an interesting topic for me because I always kind of think inflation is higher than reported. And a big part of the reason that I think that, and I do want to chat too, I'll just kind of tease this. We're going to talk about all these things affecting all of us. But I want to kind of wrap things up at the end and talk about, well, where's the opportunity? Because wherever stuff like this is going on, wherever there's big changes, there's opportunity. Wealth is transferred, during times like these. And so I do want to hit on that. But, going back to the inflation thing, I always am, keeping an eye on inflation and what it's doing. And the big part of the reason for that is because of our national debt, right? And inflation is good for people who have loans. Inflation is good for debtors because it makes it easier and easier to pay off that money that you owe, right? And there's no bigger debtor than the United States government that I know of. And so it makes sense for the government to want inflation. Now, they do through the Fed, they do try to control the amount of inflation. And, right now, as it's accelerated, it's kind of throwing people for a loop because I think for, like you said, a long time, the Fed's done a pretty good job of reining in that inflation in that 2 to 3%, rate. And
right.
It's significantly above that now.
Yeah. That's their benchmark was 2%. And now looking at 6 or 6.5 or even higher, it's pretty much out of control. So the Fed, they've been buying back, they've accelerated their buyback of bonds so that they can raise interest rates. Originally, they talked about ending that program in June. Now they're talking about ending it in March. So this kind of goes into one of the headwinds. I'm I hate to say it because I'm a lender, but I think we're going to see increased interest rates in 2022, probably starting in the first quarter, at the end of the first quarter. And if I had to guess, I would think you're probably going to see maybe anywhere from a half to a full point increase in the prime rate by the end of the year. Still not bad because the prime rate is sitting at 3.25%, which is pretty much an all-time low for many, many years at least. So if you're at 4.25%, it's still manageable, not terrible, but higher than where it's been for the past couple of years.
Yeah, and I want to just make sure that we're not losing anybody, because we're going to talk about some interesting things here, and there's a lot of implications in a lot of different directions. But just so we don't lose anybody, the Fed uses interest rates to try to regulate the inflation amount, right? And so, over, the Great Recession and all that, the interest rates dropped in order to stimulate the economy. When interest rates drop, people borrow money. And if people, I teach this to laundromat owners who are thinking about selling their laundromats, right? If you can make your laundromat financeable, you can charge a premium for it, because if people can get a loan for it, they're willing to pay more for it, right? So when the Fed drops the interest rate, it makes money easier to borrow to go out and buy, assets, and that stimulates the economy, and gets things moving, right? Keeps inflation where it needs to be. Well, if inflation goes high, then you raise the interest rates, and it makes assets more difficult to buy. So that kind of lowers that inflation. So that's kind of how they try to manipulate the very simplistic version of how they try to manipulate the inflation rate. So I think that's why you're thinking there's going to be interest rate hikes.
Yeah. I mean, they have to do it in order to control the inflation. Otherwise, it'll get out of control. In the early 80s, inflation was sitting in double digits. You could get, if you had your money in the bank, you could get 18, 19%, but you were paying 20% on interest. So it kind of washed itself out. So they're not going to allow inflation to get that much out of control. And that's why they're going to raise these interest rates during the next year.
Yeah. And so, I mean, I think the natural tendency, if I'm somebody who's looking to buy a business or who's looking to buy some assets for my business, my natural tendency would be, well, I got to get out there and try to lock in some interest rates, or if I'm going to buy a house for that matter, right? Like I want to go out there and lock up some of that debt at the lower interest rates, but there's a lot of other complicating factors that you kind of mentioned, right? Headwinds too. So what are some of the implications of these rising interest rates?
Well, I think you hit on it, is that as interest rates rise and the cost of money or cost of borrowing money rises, that could curtail borrowing. And, what do you borrow for? You borrow to buy a business. You borrow to replace equipment in your business, in our industry. So that could have a negative implication, but I don't think it's going to be too terrible. Like I said, even if the rates go up 1 point, that's not an outrageous rate that we're looking at today. We just got used to having this very low rate, and people will just have to adjust things. Now, what happens if it costs more money to put new equipment in your store or to buy a store? Obviously, it trickles down, and laundry owners are going to have to raise prices. You'll have no choice but to do that. It's just like if your utility bills go up. The gasoline, I know I was in California last month, gasoline was $6 a gallon for premium. And I live in New York. It's not quite that high, but it's right at $5. So this is something that affects us. Go to the grocery store. A gallon of milk is probably 20% more than it was a year ago. There's a cream cheese shortage. We just had in New York because, bagels and cream cheese, there was a whole thing on television, on the news, that there's a cream cheese shortage. So what are these bagel guys doing? They're raising their prices because they're paying more to get the cream cheese. So it's a trickle down effect. But I think we all need to be aware that it's out there. And along with that are the price increases that we've seen on the equipment that in our industry. And it's not only our industry, price of lumber is up. We also finance tow trucks in our business. Price of tow trucks are up. Everything is up partly because of this supply chain crisis that we've seen.
Yeah, huge. Yeah, there's a lot to talk about for this to kick this year off, man. I want to take it down a level though of what go one level further, right? Of what you're saying, because you are saying, hey, look, we're all being affected. Gas prices are ridiculous. Grocery prices are ridiculous. I just saw something about fruits and vegetable shortages. Because, there's the labor issue and, on it, my trash isn't getting picked up today because there's a labor, there's all kinds of stuff going on today, these days. And, when the cost of us to do our business increases, like you said, we have to raise prices, but we also need to think down a level too, because our customers are, obviously that's trickling down to the customers and they're seeing those prices increase across the board too for all the things they're using. They're using the same gasoline, buying the same groceries. They're doing their laundry at our laundromats. And, I would say it's more important now than I've ever, maybe I'm just paying more attention now, but it's more important, I think, now than ever that we're paying attention to wage growth versus the inflation growth, because, a lot of us who have laundromats in lower income areas, which is a lot of laundromat owners, those are the people who are getting squeezed the most. Right. And so when we're looking to buy new stores or build new stores or expand stores, we need to be considering not just how much it's costing us, but as we pass down the cost of all of these things, we need to have some kind of understanding of how that's affecting our customer base in the grand scheme of everything else that's going on, because inflation is rising faster than wages and has been for decades, I think. I don't know if that makes sense. That's a true statement. I think we're fortunate to a certain extent. Laundry owners are, in that this is a necessity of life. Mm-hmm. You can skip this week washing your clothes, but unless you're going out and buying a bunch of new clothes, next week you're going to have to come to the laundromat. And so you will get the business. But I think, we are a customer-based business. And I think it's important for all laundry owners to convey to their customers the reason that they've had to raise their prices, and I think if you tell the customer that the customer, and I know because I've had feedback, the customer will understand, because as you said, Jordan, they're paying more to put gas in their car. They're paying more to put food on their table. This is another one of those necessities. Unfortunately, if you've had to raise your prices, it is what it is. Mm-hmm. We all have to survive with it. So no one likes to do it. It's a little bit uncomfortable, but in the long run, you have to do it. And that's the way, this is a trickle-down economy, always has been. And the last guy on the plank seems to always take a bit of the brunt. But in this case, you as the store owner, you're paying more for all these things. So you have no choice, unfortunately. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think too, we are, I just hear more and more conversations about owners raising their prices and feeling like, I think that's been kind of a weakness for our industry for a long time. And the people who,
it has been.
Yeah. The people who don't raise prices are the people who can't reinvest in their business and end up with zombie mats in their possession, right? That's
exactly right. That has been a long-standing issue in this business. But I will tell you, over the past 10 years, we've gotten a different breed of owner. Mm-hmm. And these people are more business-like. They're interested in making money. They're not afraid to pass on price increases. So it's much better today than it was 25 years ago. I'll tell you that for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think too, I couldn't agree more. And I think too, even more recently, even in the last maybe 4 or 5 years, it's kind of ramping up even more. I think there's more resources out there and there's more conversations happening between owners. And I think that, a lot of the, the breed who, would keep their machines for 40 years and that's a source of pride, and that's fine. That's one, and would be there all day. That's one way of running the business, but a newer kind of breed is coming in here where they're not trying to be there all day, or they're trying to run a legitimate business, not a self-employment job, basically.
Right. And technology has helped, the social media, it's an open book now to a certain extent. So you're right. It's definitely, it's been going in that direction for at least 10 years, and it's escalated for sure over the last 3 to 5 years. And it's good for the industry because we get more business savvy people in this business. It's good for everybody.
So we're going off script a little here, but out of curiosity, does that slow down due to all of these headwinds coming in? Does that keep people from, keep business savvy people from coming into our industry or building newer, better, bigger stores? Or?
Well, that's a good question. I think for the laundry owner that this is their sole business and they work it day in, day out, it's not something that's kind of a part-time thing. I think those people are going to continue to invest and reinvest in their business because that's the only way they can make the business grow. Mm-hmm. I think people who want to get into this business, maybe prices of existing stores might escalate a little bit. But if they really want to get into the business, I think they're going to do it. So it could have some negative effect on certain parts of the industry. But overall, I think the people who are involved in the business know you have to reinvest to keep your business growing. And if you're in the business and you want to buy another store or you need to retool, I think you're going to do it. You may try to put it off a little bit, but I think it will be done. Yeah.
Okay, let's go. We kind of hit on inflation and we hit on interest rates. Anything else you want to say on interest rates before we?
No, I think they'll speak for themselves. Everybody will know it because you'll hear it from the Fed. You'll read it in the paper. It'll be out there. So I think we've kind of covered that one pretty well.
Yeah. And I'm just going to throw a quick plug out there. I've got a video. It's a couple months old now, but it's on, I did a video on YouTube on why I think you should consider buying new equipment right now. And I think it's more relevant now than it was a couple months ago, even when I put it out. So I'm going to link to that for anybody who's interested. And in the very end of that, I talk a little bit more about inflation and why it's good to kind of lock in some of that debt, right, longer term debt right now because of inflation.
Yeah, do it now. Absolutely do it now.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's jump to equipment pricing and kind of where we're at there, because I know obviously that's the lifeblood of our business, right? Is that equipment. And,
right.
And as we've been seeing over the last year or two, prices have been going up, and I think it's going to continue in 2022.
Well, I think it will be. It's for many, many years in this industry, the manufacturers had maybe one price increase a year. It was usually 2 or 3%, and it was absorbed by the vendor, and the vendor passed it on to the owner, to the laundromat owner. So that's what it was. But this past year, because of the supply chain crisis, because of the chip crisis, many of these vendors or many of these manufacturers had multiple price increases. That's the first time I've ever seen it. And, the industry passed it on and the industry accepted it. They had no choice but to accept it. And the manufacturers had no choice but to pass it on. As a couple of the manufacturers import equipment from Europe and from China. I was told that, and I know that cost of import of bringing a container over was maybe $3,000 or $4,000. Now it's $20,000. I mean, that's just an incredible increase. And as you know, living in California, and I know living in New York, look out in the harbor and you see all these boats sitting out there. They can't even get them unloaded, and they can't get them to shore. So that's a big issue. And unfortunately, the manufacturers were faced with price increases, and it just was passed on down the line. So it's there. It's being dealt with. It was dealt with throughout the year because some manufacturers had multiple price increases during this year. And it's just going to be the way it is. Hopefully next year, maybe they'll only have one or two instead of three or four. But we'll see. But it's a fact, unfortunately.
Yeah, we will see. And man, I mean, listen, I don't see, at least as of right now, I don't see any indication that things are going to be different. You know, things obviously can change over the year, but I think in the short term, first half of the year, I don't see any indication that that's going to slow down.
I agree. I agree. I mean, the outlook is not too rosy to begin the year as far as the supply chain getting straightened out. And as a matter of fact, today in the Wall Street Journal, they had an article about it. And most of the experts, whoever's considers themselves an expert, feel like it's going to persist for most of 2022 and will start to ease itself out in 2023.
Yeah, well, it brings to mind to me the old saying, you walk 10 miles into the forest. If you want to get out, you got to walk 10 miles to get out, right? You can't just shortcut. And if it's kind of backed us up over the last year or two, it's going to take us at least that long, you know, to get things situated for us and to get back on track to where we, if we can ever. We will. Yeah, we will. It's just going to take some time. Yeah. And I don't anticipate prices going backwards ever. No, you know, on anything.
On anything.
Yeah,
that's true. The only thing that seems to be somewhat volatile and goes back and forth are gas prices.
Yeah,
because that is such an open market that you see what's going on with OPEC and the local and the domestic suppliers that you kind of can see what's going on. But in hard goods like this, very seldom do prices go down. Once they go up, that's where they are.
Yeah. Yeah. I would say the one possible caveat to that, and probably not in our particular industry, but technology does tend to have deflationary aspects as, you know, technology gets big, you know, faster, smaller, better, prices tend to decrease, but I don't think there's enough. Our equipment's not technological enough to really be impacted too much by those deflationary pressures. So
I would tend to agree. What we can hope is that into the future, maybe there won't be as many, and maybe they'll skip a year or two without having to raise prices as things start to settle down. But I don't think you're going to see any of these manufacturers come out and reduce their prices.
No. Well, just like probably none of us are going to reduce our price.
No, you're not. No, you're not going to. You have a laundry, you have a price. You're not going to go back on your price, not unless there's a major recession or something.
Yeah. Well, I mean, pricing is one thing, but here's the deal is that right now, if I want to go buy new equipment, not only is it going to cost me more than it would have at the beginning of the year, but it's going to take me sometimes 4, 5, 9, 10 months to get that equipment. So delivery times are extending out too, which I think has a lot of maybe even more ripple effects.
Yeah.
Price increases.
Yeah, I agree, because if you can't get the equipment, it's one thing if you have an existing laundry and you're retooling it and your equipment is still working. Well, you can wait. You may not want to wait, but you can wait to get that equipment. But if you're building a laundry and if you signed a lease, and for argument's sake, let's say you have 6 months free rent, and usually that's plenty of time to get your store built, get the equipment installed and be up and running. But if your equipment is not coming for 9 months, that's a problem. And you don't want to be paying rent for 3 months when you don't even have the equipment in your store. So delivery times are going to be crucial. Hopefully the manufacturers will be able to catch up as we get into the year. But right now, I'm hearing delivery times as far out as 11 months on some equipment. Mm-hmm. So that's definitely, I don't know how you address that. There's nothing you can do about it if the manufacturer can't make it because they can't get the resources to build it or the goods, the supplies to build it. It's going to be tough to fix it. So we're just going to have to, I think everybody in the industry just has to pay attention to it and just monitor it as close as you can. And when you're buying equipment with your local vendor, just push them hard to get it as quickly as you can get it. But you have to also remember they're at the mercy of the manufacturer. And if the manufacturer can't make it, it's going to be kind of hard to deliver it. So that's something that we have never seen, or I've never seen in this industry, not extended delivery times like this, but we just all have to deal with it.
Yeah. And I will say, kind of going on the other side, I mean, not only do you need to kind of try to push that distributor to get the equipment quicker, I mean, you're also having to push on the landlord side to try to get some free rent or half rent or whatever. Right. And through just the negotiations I've been doing lately, some landlords are willing to do some of that, but there's not very many that I've encountered that are willing to go 9 months or a year free rent. Yeah. And, even some of the bigger markets in LA and New York, some of the Florida markets, some of the Texas market, Chicago area, landlords that I've talked with, even 6 months is really pushing it for a lot of these guys because they feel like they can kind of turn over, which is a little bit surprising to me, actually, coming off of the whole epidemic thing. Well, I think, you mentioned something earlier. What some of the opportunities? The opportunities are in renting, because there are a lot of vacancies. A lot of landlords lost tenants that didn't reopen. And so I think they're a little more amenable today than they were pre-pandemic. And so that is a discussion that if your equipment is going to be delayed out 6, 7, 8, 9 months, when you're negotiating your lease, you have to bring that to the landlord's attention and see if he'll work with you on it, because it's going to be tough if you got to start paying rent and you don't have equipment in the store and obviously can't open your store. So, but I do think it depends on who it is, obviously. These huge landlords, they don't give a damn. Mm-hmm. But a smaller landlord, and we talk to landlords all the time. I spoke to 2 today, as a matter of fact, for a couple of customers that I'm working with. One of them was very amenable, understood what we were talking about, and wanted that tenant. He wanted the laundry as a tenant because he knew the laundry would stay open no matter what. He knows that this particular prospective tenant has other stores. He's seen them. He knows they'll be a good tenant. So it just depends on who you're speaking to, but it's for sure something when you're negotiating a lease. And if you know that your delivery times on your equipment is going to be delayed or could be delayed, I would bring that out during those lease negotiations and see how the landlord will assist you if you don't get the equipment in a timely fashion. Yeah. And I would say too, just based on my experience talking with landlords, it's good to have that conversation earlier than later, and just kind of lay your cards on the table and say, hey, here's the situation I'm dealing with is, supplies, it's backed up, the delivery times are backed up and costs are all up through the roof. And, so have that conversation early and just, put your cards on the table, because those landlords, like you said, some of them are going to understand and work with you, and some of them aren't. And It's better to know early for you and for them if they're going to work with you or not. You hate to invest a lot of time and money and then just to realize that they're really not going to work with you.
That's really good advice. Bring it out early. Tell them exactly what's going on and see if you can make a deal with them.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, and just kind of to mention this, the delivery time issue is across the board, right? It's it's all the manufacturers are dealing with. It's not like 1 or 2 of them. It's all of them. They're dealing with it to varying degrees. But all of them are dealing with those things too. So it's not like you can say, hey, one is got long delivery times and the other one is shorter and I'll just go with them. It's all of them are dealing with that issue. So I just wanted to make that point. Anything else on delivery times?
No, I think we covered it.
All right. Well, I mean, listen, if the cards weren't stacked enough with rising inflation and interest rates going up, equipment prices increasing, and delivery times being extended out, we also have the cost of construction going up, and kind of along with that is the rising cost of labor, both on the construction side and also on our employee side of things. Yeah. So let's talk about cost of construction and how that's affecting things right now.
Well, we heard from different laundry owners that we do business with that construction costs have gone up anywhere from 25 to 50%, depending on what you're doing and where you're doing it. In California, New York, Chicago, the big cities, it's gone up tremendously. Not only has the cost gone up, but the time to build the store has been extended because of the supply chain issue. I mean, I'll relay a personal issue. I'm doing a small addition on my house. And so the other day I see a load of lumber come, and I called the contractor and I said, are you coming tomorrow to start framing out? And he said, no. He said, they back ordered half the lumber. And I'm saying, like, what the hell? I mean, what does that mean? He said, well, hopefully it'll be here in a couple of days, but I can't come do the job until I get all the materials. So that is going on with everybody.
Yep.
And so you have higher construction costs, you have material deliveries, just like we're talking about deliveries of the laundry equipment. It's the same thing for materials needed for construction. I've also heard in certain parts, particularly in your backyard, getting permits has been a nightmare, and taking twice as long to get permits as it usually does. So all of these things are, you just have to understand what you're getting into when you start to build either a ground up, if you're doing a ground up thing, or if you're going to rent and you're rehabbing a space. You just have to get all these timelines in your mind and in your project, so you know how you can deal with it. So again, I don't think there's much you can do with it other than know it up front and pin your contractor down as best you can as to what is the time frame to get the permits, to get this thing built, make sure all the supplies and materials that the contractor needs that he can get or he's already ordered, so that you're not faced with some unreasonable amount of time to finish the project.
Yeah. And I mean, the other thing to kind of consider with all that, and all that is insanely true. I mean, kind of famously, the lumber prices were super high and they came back down a little bit. I think
a little bit.
They've kind of oscillated back and forth a little bit, but they're not quite as high as they were, I don't think. But I mean, it's not just lumber, it's everything. And, on top of that, with the supply chain issues that are slowing things down, at least here, and I know in other big metros, and I think kind of all across, it's been difficult for general contractors to find subcontractors to work and to find, labor to do, especially, most laundromats are smaller projects. Even the $1 million laundromats, that's a relatively small project. And so, finding labor that is in excess of doing maybe some larger, more profitable project for a construction worker to take the time away from those to come do a relatively smaller project is difficult too, and that on top of the permitting, right. And all of that. So there's a lot that is stacked up on there. And I just want to kind of mention, we've been talking about the supply chain delays and, the permitting delays and the construction delays and, all this stuff. And one of the things I think it does that we don't consider very often in this industry, that maybe they do more intentionally in real estate investing circles, but I don't hear really talked about in laundromat circles because it really hasn't been that big of an issue, is holding costs, right? The longer it takes if you're doing ground up or a remodel rehab, the longer it takes to get that done, you still have expenses to be paying.
Right.
And so you need to factor those in, into these longer timelines that you're dealing with, because it's going to end up costing you a little bit more money. And the worst thing to happen would be for you to not budget in those holding costs,
right?
And have to abort before you get to the end of the line there.
Yeah, that's a disaster.
Yeah,
that is a disaster. And, all of us have probably seen it. You see a house being built, and then all of a sudden construction stops. Mm-hmm. Well, I'll bet 90% of the time or 80% of the time, they ran out of money. Mm-hmm. Or they didn't do exactly what you're suggesting, figuring a contingency and holding costs, because almost no project runs true to form. So, and especially now. So that's good advice. Definitely need to consider that.
Yeah, I don't think there really is a form now. It can't run true form. It's amorphous right now. I don't know. Everything's kind of in flux that we've been talking about. I mean, we've hit a lot of things, and to be honest, listening to all of this stuff, I mean, I could see how this could feel to anybody listening kind of disheartening and a little bit discouraging, or whether you're an owner or you're trying to get into the industry, and I think especially a lot of people who are trying to get in, on the lower end side, where they're trying to come in and rehab a zombie mat or something like that. It can get a little bit discouraging, I think, to hear some stuff.
But I think, there is a shining light here. And the shining light is that this industry is a necessity of life. This industry during the pandemic was ruled an essential business that had to stay open. We did not see a lot of laundries go out of business because of the pandemic. In fact, a lot of them got a little stronger as things started to improve. So it's still a very good industry. Yes, we have headwinds, but I can tell you every business today has headwinds. We're not unique. It's not like what we're seeing is unique to the laundry business. It's not. It's every industry is got some kind of headwinds going into to the 2022. But as I said, I think, that for the people that really want to be in the business and are already in the business, there's some good opportunities out there. And, someone else's loss always turns into somebody else's gain. And that's what you're going to see in 2022. So I wouldn't say to anybody who's in this business, sell your laundry and get out. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying we've got some things to deal with. And anybody who wants to get into the business, it could be a good time to get into the business, especially if you find one of those zombie mats that you can pick up at a good price. And then you stay with it for a little while, and then you start to retool it and put in new equipment. And you've signed a new long-term lease with a landlord who's giving you really good rent, because you can get good rent now compared to pre-pandemic. So there's some good things there. You just got to be careful as we get into 2022 and make sure that you've taken into consideration everything that's going on today.
Yeah. Yeah. And you mentioned already the rent is one of those opportunities. Let's kind of segment this out, and maybe we can kind of give some practical advice to people. So let's talk for a second to someone who's maybe looking to buy their first laundromat.
Pro tips.
What are the opportunities for somebody trying to get into this industry going into 2022, with the knowledge of all these headwinds here, okay, so we have, I'll throw in the opportunity to get a good long-term rent. I mean, I think that's an opportunity there for somebody to get in this business. Are there any other opportunities people should be looking for?
I think rent is a big thing. I think that if you can buy, as we refer to them, these zombie mats, possibly you can get it at a good price. Then you have to consider when and if you have to retool the store, what's that going to cost. I also think that the manufacturers and vendors realize, because of the price increases and the delivery times, they still need to sell equipment. So while equipment may be higher and delivery times longer, I think, you can still make a good deal with the local vendor, because they need to move the metal one way or another. Can't sit in the manufacturer's warehouse, and it can't sit in their warehouse. Mm-hmm. So there's an opportunity there. And again, I think for those that are in the business and want to retool, I think generally when you do a retool, you generally raise your prices. So, you might have to raise them a little more than you would have otherwise because of some of these headwinds. But again, I think because the business is an essential business, it's a repetitive business. The customer doesn't come in just once and wash their clothes. They're going to come in on a weekly basis or bi-weekly basis. So there's just it's just a good industry to stay in. I certainly wouldn't want to see, and I don't think we're going to see a mass exodus from this industry. I think people will stay in it. We just have to deal with some of these things that are a little bit out of the ordinary.
Yeah. And I think those are all just really good pieces of advice. I want to say too, I think that a huge opportunity for current owners right now, or if you're going to buy one, in this year in 2022, I think a huge opportunity is to be more on the aggressive side of raising your prices, and not for the sake of necessarily taking more profit, but for the sake of reinvesting in your business during this time, because I think a lot of businesses aren't going to do that. And when laundromats, especially, kind of in your area, are not reinvesting in their business and things tend to deteriorate, if you're able to provide the kind of value that's going to allow you to charge a little bit more for your wash, but that's going to allow you to reinvest in your business, that's going to be a virtuous cycle that is going to serve your business well. And I think that's a huge opportunity right now as people are tightening the purse strings, trying to, figure out what's going on and how to best navigate this. I think if you can figure out ways to serve your customers better during this time, and as a result, raise your prices a little, and as a result, reinvest some of that back into your business to serve your customers better, to raise your prices more, and on and on and on. I think it's going to serve you well. And I think it's going to be a huge opportunity coming out the backside of all this for a lot of owners.
That is exactly right. And I have a customer who for years has always raised his prices, but every year he did something in his laundry. He improved it. He may have bought equipment. He may have painted the place, put in a new ceiling, put in a new floor. Every year he did it because he showed his customer he was reinvesting in his business. And when you do that, the customer appreciates it and they understand why you've had to raise your prices. So that's great advice, Jordan. And I think you're right. The people that do that are going to see the pluses on the backside.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, hey, I think that we are poised one way or another for an unprecedented year. I don't know about you, but I'm actually pretty excited about this year, despite the headwinds. And a lot of it's your perspective, right? You can see them as headwinds because, there's some obstacles to be overcome there, or you can see them for the opportunities that are there. And I think the people who are able to kind of shift that perspective and not get frustrated with the long wait times and the rising prices, but be able to get a little more creative about how you're going to run your business, be a little more strategic about how you're going to plan things out for your business. And there's a lot of opportunity being presented right now during this transition. And it's an opportunity for you to come out on the other side of this thing in a much better shape than you're in right now, even.
Right. Yeah, I agree. I think it's going to be a very interesting year. I think in spite of what we've talked about here, there's still a lot of pluses to this industry. People who are already in it know it, and people who want to get in it will find out when they get in. But it's a great industry, and we're going to weather these storms, and we will survive. And like you said, it'll come out on the other side as a plus.
Yeah. Yeah. And I am seeing, another kind of plus for our industry is I am seeing more and more people taking notice of this industry and seeing the value in this industry and seeing the opportunity in this industry. And I think that's led to some of the more sophisticated business owners that we've been seeing too,
right?
In our industry right now. And so I think that there's a lot more interest. I think that's going to continue as people are looking for stable places to put their investment money when there's a lot of unknowns going on right now. So, man, Mark, this has been incredible. I never thought I'd be like so excited to talk about inflation and interest rates and all this stuff. But man, I'm really jazzed for this year, for 2022. I hope that everybody here listening is, taking away the opportunity here and is getting excited for this business or for business this year. And I just want to encourage you. Hey, none of this really means anything to you unless you put it into action, right? You've got to take action on this stuff. This is not the kind of thing where you sit and wait and things just kind of work out. Like we said, prices aren't going back down. Timelines, at least in the short term, are not getting any shorter. So you got to start being a little more proactive, taking action. And that's when you're going to see the big gains coming out the other side. So Mark, thanks.
Agreed. Appreciate the time. 2022. Let's get them.
Always a pleasure. Thanks, man. And
all right,
hey, make sure you join Mark and I and our crew on our webinar that we got coming up. Details are in the link in the description and in the show notes, because we're going to dig into this stuff a little bit more and get real practical boots on the ground, talking with a few different people about this stuff. So get excited about that too. All right, Mark, appreciate it.
All right. Thank you. Take care.
Okay, I don't know if you're freaked out because of that episode or if you're excited and pumped. I hope you're coming out of this episode